You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 275.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. I am in the middle of my Christmas cookie baking week, an annual tradition here for me as I prepare tins of cookies to give away as gifts to my family and friends. So it was really fun to have this interview recently with Katie Jacobs, who is the author of the Chocolate Chip Cookie Book, as we're diving into talking about all things chocolate chip cookies. Katie is a fourth-generation Nashville native. She is an author, stylist, and photographer, as well as the creator and art director at Styling My Everyday, a food and lifestyle blog. Today on the podcast, Katie and I talk about her two cookbooks, her journey to write her most recent cookbook that has a narrow concept, along with her tips for how she balances her work, being a mom of three, and keeps herself organized as she is working on her cookbook projects. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Katie Jacobs. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm so excited to be here.
So excited that you're here too. Can't wait to dive in, talk all about your cookbook. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Katie Jacobs. I'm a fourth generation, questionably fifth generation Nashvilleian. We have been here forever. I would never leave Nashville. I love it here. I come from a long line of cooks. Everybody in my family cooks. My mom, my grandparents, my brothers, my stepdad, my sisters. So family functions in our family are a big food to do. My mom is a beautiful cook. My grandmother was a beautiful entertainer. So that just kind of is ingrained in me, and making things beautiful is ingrained in me. I was a graphic design major and then became a food stylist and photographer. And that kind of led me in the direction of shooting, photographing, and designing cookbooks. And then I produced my first cookbook, So Much to Celebrate, in 2008. And then this one, my new chocolate chip cookie book, this year.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful book. And did you do all the photos for this book?
Yes. All the photography was mine.
And the styling, obviously, which goes along with the photography.
Yes. All the food styling, the photography. I designed the book. I wrote the book. I researched the book. I invented all the recipes. So from beginning to end, it is my little book baby.
Yes, and let's talk about it. So the chocolate chip cookie book. I want to tell you that when I talk to other cookbook authors about ideas to write about in the food space, yes, I believe they're infinite. Because what you have done with this book is you not only took cookies, but you went on a deep dive into the chocolate chip world.
Right.
So you could imagine there could be companion books about there's tons of different kinds of cookies out there.
Right.
But you went chocolate chip, and I think you need to tell us a story about why chocolate chip.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my background is, like I said, in graphic design. And so I think that as a graphic designer, you have to create within a parameter. You have a box that you have to create within. So you have to learn to be exceptionally creative with what binds you. So I come from that background of I really like when I have a parameter and I can be creative in that. I feel lost when it's endless. It's hard for me to, food plan for the week because it's, I can make anything.
Yes.
But if I'm like on a vegan diet, I really enjoy like finding, expanding upon something that is solely, like a category of something.
Right. It's kind of defined. Yep.
Right. So years and years ago, I shot a book for HarperCollins by Sherry Gore. And it was a pie book. She is an Amish author, and it was over 100 recipes for pies. And so I had to bake and style and photograph 100 pies, and we did it in about 4 weeks. It was a fast one. And I was just like incredibly intrigued by it. And it is a more wide open category than chocolate chip cookies because it is pies. It would be like a cookie book, but I still enjoyed, I thought it was so fun, to try to style 100 pies different way, like really different ways for the book. And then I came out with an entertaining book, and the number one recipe in that book was my chocolate chip cookie recipe. And it was so funny that out of the entire entertaining book, I mean, there are recipes for pot roast and yeast rolls and birthday cakes. And it was the chocolate chip cookie recipe that people came up to me over and over and over again. And were like, this is my family's chocolate chip cookie recipe. This we will hand this down through generations. And it really touched me that people really love that recipe, and that holds true throughout the generations. And people would come and tell me about their grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe. And it was funny, that it was the recipe that I evolved from my mom's recipe. And the more people came up and told me, the more I kept thinking, what if I made a book just about chocolate chip cookies? And then the pandemic hit, and it really scaled everything back to what is really important. And we were all kind of stuck at home, and everybody was baking bread and cookies and things. And it really expanded upon that idea of, chocolate chip cookies are what's important to my family because that's what we're passed down through generations. I bake with my 3 little kids on the counter. It's time together in the kitchen. We're baking it for neighbors. We're baking it for people that are friends that have just had babies. It just felt really heartfelt and back to the basics and what is simple and important in life. And once I decided to write a book about chocolate chip cookies, the ideas, I could have invented 5,000 recipes for chocolate chip cookies. I mean, people are always like, how in the world did you come up with over 100 recipes? My publisher, my editor had to be like, stop, you have to stop. You have to draw a line. So I created and finalized and photographed over 130 recipes for the book. They made me cut 30 recipes for page count, which hurt my heart because they're all my children. But it was fun that we got to release those recipes leading up to the book as pre-sale incentives. And so everything got used and out there. But I still to this day, I'm like, oh, shoot, I could have done this I could have done this recipe in the book. So it's just been really fun to kind of think endlessly about a very specific subject.
Yeah. And I call that an inch wide and a mile deep rather than a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yeah, I love that.
And how it is fun when you have a defined parameter and that that's what you're going to write about. It really does open up the world to that topic. And you start to really think about it and see it. And I'm so glad that you took the chance and did this. What'd your publisher think when you pitched it to them?
Right. Okay. So I went with my original publisher from the first book, HarperCollins. It's just under different imprint. It's Harper Celebrate. My first one was under Thomas Nelson. So at first I think it was a no. And I think it was all during the pandemic and everybody was kind of unsure what was going on. And nobody was really, saying yes to publishing books at that point. So it sat on the back burner, and I actually pitched it to another publisher and they said no. And then I came back to HarperCollins and the timing was right. And they were like, yes, of course. And I loved working with them on the first book. So I was thrilled to be with them on this one.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people may hear you say that and they wonder, how do you handle the rejection from a publisher? Like the topic that you're so interested in doing and you're so passionate about, and to hear somebody say no. What's your philosophy about that?
I get told no all the time. I mean, that's just funny. Is I really don't at all take it personally, and I never have over the course of my career. And a no from one person is just a no from one person. It didn't feel like a no. It just felt like a not at this time. It's not the right time for it. But I never let it go. I'm that kind of person that it's like, okay, I'll go find somebody else that will love it as much as I do and see the potential in it. I never take no as a no. I always loop back around or find another avenue to get something done.
Great philosophy. So let's dive into the book a little bit. What when you started, chocolate chip cookie, I'm going down the path. How did you get this whole thing started and kick it off and get the ball rolling, so to speak? Um,
Yeah,
where'd you begin with this?
I am just like, I am the ultimate list maker, lists on lists on lists. And I think that the book lives in an Excel sheet for years. And it was just like, okay, how can I make Rice Krispie treat chocolate chip cookies? Do I make a Rice Krispie treat that has chocolate chip cookies in it, or do I put a Rice Krispie treat in a chocolate chip cookie? That was kind of my mindset on, okay, we in the South, we love banana pudding. How can I do a really fun spin on banana pudding that's chocolate chips, but not gross? And, like it was really fun to adapt my very favorite things into the chocolate chip cookie atmosphere. And it was really important to me. And somebody wrote this on an Amazon review, and it hurt my heart that I was just throwing chocolate chip cookies into recipes. I really, throughout the book, made sure that every single recipe was a chocolate chip cookie based recipe, like the chocolate chip cookie shortbread cookies. It was really important to me that I wasn't just throwing chocolate chips into a shortbread cookie recipe. I wanted them to be based, and the flavors to be based in chocolate chip cookie realm. So that's sugar, brown sugar, butter, chocolate chips, vanilla, the basics of a chocolate chip cookie, the flavors are there in each recipe. So that was kind of my hardcore. If I was creating something, I really wanted to make sure that it went by those guidelines, that I wasn't just tossing chocolate chip cookies into pancake batter and saying they're chocolate chip cookie pancakes.
Yeah.
So I made lists and lists and lists and cutting things down and testing. And it's like those shortbread cookies I almost gave up because 7 recipes in, I'm like, they don't taste like chocolate chip cookies, but I really want a shortbread cookie recipe. So I finally got there, and really proud of the ones that took the extra effort.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a basic recipe that you started with, something that was in your family or something that your grandmother or your mother made? Like, where did you, once you started to deviate, even in the very first chapter, which is all the classic chocolate chip cookie recipes, because, some people like them thin, some people like them thick. Walk us through that whole development of even that chapter, because I think different people like their chocolate chip cookies.
Absolutely.
Different ways.
When the whole introduction, there's like a 40-page introduction, which my editor didn't love. The whole introduction is based on a basic chocolate chip cookie recipe. It is the chocolate chip cookie recipe my mom made every day when we came home from school. And I call it the after school chocolate chip cookie recipe. And it's very basic. It is a stick of butter, half a cup of sugar, half a cup of brown sugar, 1 egg, just like the most basic chocolate chip cookie recipe. And then throughout the intro, I talk about how each ingredient is altered, changes the outcome of the recipe. So if you use baking powder instead of baking soda, or you melt your butter or use room temperature butter, or if you edit the ratio between white sugar and brown sugar. And I give a picture for each edit that shows you, if you, like you said, love thin chocolate chip cookies, this is how you edit your flour ratio to create that. Or if you love, denser, cakier cookies, this is how you, add an extra egg, or use cake flour instead of all-purpose flour that makes that, kind of scientific background behind the chocolate chip cookie. So I did that first out of the gate. I knew that I wanted to create a book about chocolate chip cookies. So I really researched the science behind it and made that grid and that guide. And then that ultimately helped guide me through editing and changing, everyday recipes that create something spectacular and something different. That way you're 100 recipes for very different specific cookies.
Yeah. And the chapter after that, once you go through all these classics and everybody can kind of recreate and make the kind of cookie that they like, you dive into all these specialty cookies and bars, and then you get into cakes and pies and fun stuff. And then you have a section on healthiest treats. So I thought we'd walk through a few of the recipes if you're okay with that, and talk a little bit about them. And of course, if anything else comes to mind with any of the other recipes, feel free to jump in. I just picked a few out. Being a
Lovely.
Kentucky girl, I had to, of course, look and see what you put bourbon in. And there were some that did have bourbon in them. So why don't you talk about the recipes that had bourbon and how they were used? I think there were a couple.
Yes, the one that stands out to me is the brown butter bourbon pecan chocolate chip cookies. My favorite cocktail is an old fashioned. So, thinking towards how can I incorporate cocktails into chocolate chip cookies? We have a dark chocolate espresso chocolate chip cookie that, several people have talked about, like it's like an espresso martini cookie. And I wanted like a cookie that was kind of like my favorite cocktail. So the recipe starts with making like bourbon pecan, like glazed pecans, and then you use that in the chocolate chip cookie recipe, and then you top it with them. And you're trading out vanilla for bourbon, which it just creates kind of like this layer of flavor that you can't really put your finger on, but you're like, oh, it's so smoky and delicious and sweet and salty and all the things. And then you would love the Kentucky Derby pie bars are just like incredible. I just wanted to do like a riff on a Kentucky Derby pie. It was around that time of year, and I was like, what if we made it like into a bar instead of a pie? And that's really fun. And then the pies I use a lot. I created a chocolate chip cookie crust that I use in a lot of the pie recipes, which was kind of like the beginning of like some really fun adventures. I'm like, well, could I make a caramel pie on top of the chocolate chip cookie crust and top it with bananas? Or there's like a chocolate mousse pie with mascarpone and whipped cream on top that's incredible for Thanksgiving coming up. I just really wanted to be able to create something that it is a book for everyone and every holiday and every season. So right now there's white chocolate peppermint chocolate chip cookies, and you could make, the chocolate mousse pie for Thanksgiving, and there's chocolate chip cookie dough, birthday cake, and there's chocolate chip cookie dough, cheesecake. It just is like never ending. It is, and I wanted to make it for every baker, for very beginning bakers to very advanced. So there's chocolate chip cookie baklava and chocolate chip cookie cinnamon rolls, and just for the more advanced bakers. And then there's chocolate chip cookie bark for the more beginning bakers.
Yeah. Yeah. I did like your, in the index section, the favorite recipes by season. You wouldn't necessarily think that a book like this would have seasonality to it, but I think it's great that you pointed that out so that people could maybe decide based on what season they're in, what holidays are coming up. Like you mentioned, that some of these are very well suited for that holiday.
Yeah. And I mean, even for summer, you don't necessarily think of a summer or spring chocolate chip cookies, but there's a lemon white chocolate chip cookies. There's the banana pudding chocolate chip cookies. So it was really fun to make some more seasonal options throughout that section.
Yeah. Now you have a chapter called Fun Stuff. And in there's a recipe that stood out to me for chocolate chip cookie cereal. Now, back when I was a kid and people would buy boxes of cereal for breakfast, I think there was a cereal called Cookie Crisp,
Is it
maybe?
Yes,
something like
Cookie
that.
Crisp. I was like Cookie Crunch, Cookie Crisp.
I think it's called Cookie Crisp. So when I saw that recipe, I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. But the cookies are teeny tiny. So
Yes.
tell us about that recipe, how you created it, and then what did you use to get the cookies so small?
Yeah. So in part of my list, I'm listing things by seasons, I'm listing things by holidays, and then I really listed things by, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, let's make some breakfast options for chocolate chip cookies. So there's chocolate chip cookie waffles. And I thought a chocolate chip cookie cereal, it seems like a natural fit because cookies and milk, that kind of thing. So there's oats in the recipe, which make it, more substantial. And making the cookies tiny is the time consuming part.
I'm sure it is. They are little.
Commit.
Right.
But you basically use the smallest cookie scoop, and then divide that cookie scoop in fourths with a knife.
Wow.
And then roll them out. So yeah, that is a time consuming adventure, but I did it. My kids thought it was super fun. So it's a fun activity to do with the kids, make little cookie dough balls. And then of course they get to eat the chocolate chip cookie cereal, which is so fun. They think is so fun. And it's also really fun to top on top of ice cream, to put on top of yogurt, and use it all kinds of different ways.
There's also a chocolate chip cookie granola, which I thought looked really good. And that probably would be even a nice gift to make for the holidays. I would think it would bag up well.
Yes, it's beautiful in a jar, wrapped in a bow.
Yeah.
And it's kind of an unexpected, not so sweet gift.
Yeah. So there's a chapter called Healthy-ish, which is for a lot of different ways that chocolate chip cookies could be made if people want to modify the ingredients. Why don't you tell us about the kinds of things that are in that chapter?
Yeah, I really wanted to make the book literally for everyone. There is a recipe for everyone. So there's 2 gluten-free options, vegan, there is dairy-free, and there's protein bars made with chickpeas, there's whole wheat, there's energy bites. I wanted to run the gamut of, there's no excuse for you not to love this book, because there is something for everyone in every stage of their life. I go through stages, we all do, where we want to be healthier, or we're cutting out dairy, or, we're really trying to cut back on certain things. And so I wanted this to be, a lifetime encyclopedia of, no matter where you are in your life, there will always be a recipe in here for you.
Yeah.
And I am not gluten-free or vegan or any of those things. So it was really important that those cookies taste really good in that section. So I was really hard on, during those weeks of testing, that if my husband came home and he didn't think that was the best chocolate chip cookie, then it was out. If he was like, oh, it tastes gluten-free, it's an absolute no. And I'm baking a lot, serving a lot of samples at book signings and that kind of thing. And people are wowed by the almond flour gluten-free recipe, because it is incredibly delicious, completely on its own, nothing to do with gluten-free. And that is a big win for me, because that was just something that was really important to me. I didn't want that to be the crap section, because, and that's another thing that I excel at. I like the confines of things. So that section was really, I kind of put off doing it, because I was kind of scared. I don't know a lot about gluten-free baking and vegan baking and that kind of thing. And then it was so fun to kind of learn and navigate through creating some really excellent recipes for people that, have dietary restrictions.
Yeah. And I think that in the baking space, types of flour, different grain flours and different nut flours, as well as gluten-free options, have really exploded. So
yes,
I like that you did one with the almond flour, and then one without, which is actually made with gluten-free flour, and then with the xanthan gum in it to add a little bit of thickening. But I think it's a great thing to let somebody try them, make sure they taste just as good as any other cookie would taste.
Right.
And then you're like, they probably didn't even know that was vegan or paleo, or the one with tahini looks really good too.
It is. And I tried so many sugar alternatives. I bought every single one that is available, and hated the artificial sugar.
Yeah.
But coconut sugar, I actually end up loving, and I have incorporated it more into our life now. But it was fun to kind of experiment and see what's out there and find what is legitimately good. And now there are I love Hu chocolate chips, HU. They sweeten with dates. So it's kind of all natural, and it's a really fun, really delicious way to, kind of change things up.
Yeah. I heard you say that you have 3 children. How do you, well, this is kind of a balanced question, but I'm thinking of not only balancing family life with writing a cookbook, but balancing what you all are eating with creating recipes for 130 recipes, which you had initially, and some of them you're doing a lot more than one time.
Oh yeah.
Talk us through that a little bit, because there could be someone listening that's like, how in the world do I work all this in to not only trying to eat well
healthy
myself and feed my children, but having children and then, cooking and baking all these cookies.
Yeah, so I created it was over the course of 2 years. I tested and baked and shot the book. And I cooked and baked each recipe at least 4 times. I wanted to make sure I it was usually a creation and then an edit and then a final bake and then an additional final bake for shooting.
Right.
Because with the first
Did you
cookbook,
I was going to ask, did you do all that before you had your contract or after you had your contract?
after I had my contract.
That's what I was going to say. Because a lot of people will dive into all that before they even have a contract. But I always think that's not a great idea. They should get the contract nailed down and make sure that this is what the publisher wants to publish before they put all the time into shooting it and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And luckily I have a publisher that I've worked with before. So they kind of signed me and let me run, which is nice. I don't like to be micromanaged. So, but at the same time, I'm the kind of author that did 130 recipes when they only wanted 100, and then I'm heartbroken they cut 30. So
so it took 2 years then of shooting and trying these multiple times.
So it was, literally tens of thousands of cookies coming out of our house. I remember my husband coming home one day and I had 7 recipes laid on the counter, and he was like, no. And I was like, you have to try them because I feel like they're all tasting the same to me. I need a fresh perspective. And I remember forcing him to take a bite and I would write down, his review and he rates everything 1 to 10. And we talk about each one, what we could do better. But we got to the point where it's like, I can't eat another cookie. And I was so funny. I was like the carpool cookie lady, like handing cookies out of my windows at carpool. And every Friday the teachers would run to my car, like, cause I have dozens of cookies and I would wrap them up cute every Friday and hand out cookies and take them to our neighbors. And the mailman, everybody was getting cookies through that time. And luckily, my kids probably are addicted to sugar like every other American child, but they got so used to it. They just know that it's mommy's work and I'm constantly baking cookies, and luckily I get to have a job that they can help with and participate in, and they're always on the counter with me, and they are my ultimate critics if they love it or hate it or think it's so cool or don't think it's so cool. It's kind of a barometer because they're so honest, they're not gonna tell me it's good if it's not. So I'm just really lucky and that's the balance, is they just do it with me. We bake cookies when they get home and I've baked all day, and they just kind of know that the kitchen is just the Santa's workshop around here.
Yeah. I think that's great. And people that write cookbooks that have families can often feed them what I'll tell a lot of people that I work with, just feed them for dinner, whatever you're working on for the cookbook. But in this case, you really can't do that.
No. Yeah. It is hard. It does get hard when I bake all day or I'm working in the kitchen all day. And then it's like, what's for dinner?
Yeah.
You're like, golly, I have to make dinner now.
Yeah.
But luckily that feels like a different avenue. Savory food feels like a different job than this. So
right. Well, when you photographed the pie cookbook, it was probably very much the same. The pies are obviously, unless there were savory pies in the book. I don't know if there were or not.
There were some.
So you can do savory pies maybe for dinner if you've been working on it, but otherwise it's giving away pies, I guess, just like you're giving away cookies.
Yes.
Yeah. And there is expense to this. People, then people are like, well, what about the expense? And I'm like, well, there is an expense, but usually if you get a traditional publishing contract, you do get an advance of royalties that helps to offset that cost, hopefully some.
I actually ended up keeping all the butter containers, like for the cardboard butter boxes, because I was going to do like a step and repeat at the launch party of butter. Yeah. And it didn't end up happening, but I have, hundreds and hundreds of butter boxes. So it's so funny to go back and look at how many pounds of butter that I've been through. Mm-hmm. It's remarkable. Yeah. The amount of butter and sugar that I've blown through in the last couple of years.
Can I ask you a question about butter? I'm in a cookie baking group it's a very regional topic called wedding cookie tables. It takes place in the northeast part of Ohio in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So at a wedding, in addition to maybe having a cake, they have a cookie table. And there's
I
all
love
these,
that.
I know all these traditional cookies that they make, but there's been this discussion in that Facebook group lately about people's chocolate chip cookies. Like they've been making this recipe for years and years, and all of a sudden it's turning out really flat. And a lot of them are thinking it's the butter. Maybe they're not making the butter like they used to, or maybe different brands, like let's just say they usually would shop at Aldi. But the Aldi regionally, maybe they have different manufacturers make the butter depending on where the store is. I don't know.
Wow.
So
the conspiracy theory on
I
butter.
know, so it is funny, but so when that happens to people, if they have a cookie recipe, like for chocolate chip cookies, we'll use this one specifically, and they always have made it, always turned out great, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. What do you think people ought to do, or what ought they to try?
Well, first off, I say check the expiration of your baking soda or baking powder, because they totally expire. And if you're not like baking tens of thousands of cookies like me, sometimes that expires in your cupboard quickly.
Okay.
As far as butter goes, I know that there's salted and unsalted butter.
Mm-hmm.
Salted butter, they basically are adding salt to it to preserve the shelf life. So salted butter is sitting on the shelf longer than unsalted butter. So if you're wanting a fresher butter, reach for unsalted butter, because it has a shorter shelf life, so they're turning it over quicker. I consistently used Land O'Lakes butter, just because it's a good price point. It's available everywhere. I wanted to, like you said, use something consistent throughout the book, but I also tested recipes with like European butter and butter alternatives and that kind of thing. But I would check expiration dates on leavening agents first.
Okay. And then when it comes to flour, did you have a certain type of flour or brand of flour that you used consistently throughout the process?
Yeah, King Arthur all-purpose flour. Yes.
Yeah. I saw also you did use European butter in some of your recipes, but that was one of the little things you deviated. You said, okay, here's what it looks like if you use a European, which is a higher fat content butter. And I love how you put the pictures in of all the different things, from melted butter, cold butter, melted and cooled butter, European butter, brown butter. If you beat the butter until it's pale, and then if you turn the page, you talk about eggs, you talk about leavening, you talk about using both baking powder and baking soda. So this grid and this section on the science behind the chocolate chip cookies is great.
It's so cool, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because have you ever been somewhere, and I do this all the time, like I'll see a chocolate chip cookie and I think, oh, that looks really good. And I taste it, that tastes really good. And then all of a sudden my mind starts to go to like, I wonder how they made that, because it doesn't always look exactly like a cookie I might make or a recipe I might have. But your visual cues here are very nice to like help people like identify, like you could identify a cookie.
That you think that you like.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to, I provide over 100 recipes for chocolate chip cookies, but I really ultimately want the reader to create their own favorite cookie. And hey, here's the guide that if you want to start off at the bourbon chocolate chip cookies, the bourbon pecan chocolate chip cookies, but you like a chewier center, you can kind of refer back to the intro to edit that recipe for your own liking.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So that's great. So you're making cookies for the promotion for this book?
Yes, I've been baking a lot. So all the baking went about 2 years, and then we edited and sent to the printer. And then there's like a 6-month lull that we got a cookie break that I didn't bake cookies for a while. And now we're back at it. We're back at turning out the cookies.
Yes.
But now it's fun because it's fun to go back and bake those recipes that I worked really, really hard on.
Yeah.
And to know that they work, in that 2 year, it was frustrating to continue to bake. There would be days where no recipes would work, and that'd be frustrating. So it's fun to go back and bake things that I worked really hard on that I know work.
Yeah. And now I had someone I interviewed for the podcast a couple of weeks ago say this to me, and she's really right. When you write a cookbook and you have created this collection of recipes, you get to use it now.
Oh yeah. My book is stained and covered and sticky, and because I'm like, this is my copy that I bake out of, and use it. And my first cookbook is like literally an encyclopedia of my family's recipes. So it's fun that my mom's yeast rolls are in there and my grandmother's carrot souffle. And yes, I cook for Thanksgiving from my first cookbook. It really
100%.
is a very selfish way of putting together your favorite recipes. And
But if you want to, you're trying to think of an idea to write a cookbook about, you can always do that. You can start with something that you're interested in, that you love to do, things you've collected recipes around, things you want to develop recipes around, and pick a topic that you enjoy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I want to use it, then other people,
100%. Yeah. And I think the more we interact with our books and the more we use them, the more excited we get about it. And the easier it is to talk about it when you go out and talk to other people. You're like,
Oh, yeah.
what? You don't have a copy of this book yet? Like
Right.
everybody needs one.
You need it. I know.
You gotta have it. Yeah.
I made 3 recipes from it this morning. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that for those of you that like to read cookbooks too, there is a lot to read. A lot, like Katie said in the intro, all about making of the cookies. So I think it's great. A lot of great head notes, where things came from, which of course is a favorite part. But if someone was listening that they're thinking, okay, I really want to do this, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe thinking about embarking on their first cookbook project?
I think just begin. I always say just begin. When people ask me a lot, how do I start a company or a blog or write a book? And I'm like, just start doing it. With my first book, it was an entertaining cookbook. So I just started, putting together parties and photographing them. And it's for the book. Well, what book? Well, it's a book that doesn't exist yet, but it will be one day for the book. And hopefully maybe in the future, I would love to write a gardening book. And so I'm already shooting stuff for the gardening book that doesn't exist. I don't have a publisher. I don't have an outline or an idea, but it is just, you begin whatever you love or whatever you want to do, just begin doing it. And then when you're passionate and you have a solid idea and a direction, then that's where you take the step to pitch it to somebody that can help you create it.
And you know what? I've been thinking about this. When we do something like this that we really love and enjoy doing, it's not just that we love it that carries it along. It's that it fills our heart and our soul with something we enjoy. And I equate this to myself. I love going to the supermarket.
You do.
If we go on vacation, like we'll go to the beach. I'm like one afternoon, I'm like, guys, I got to go to the Piggly Wiggly here down the beach road. I got to go see what's in that.
Wander the aisles.
And just walk around. If we went to Cleveland for a wedding. There's this Italian grocery store like in the middle of town. I said, I got to go there.
I love that.
I love it because first of all, I get to see the people of the town shopping for food. I get to see regional ingredients that maybe aren't available where I live. I get to see different produce in different parts of the country that, I can't find fresh okra here very often. Fresh figs are not as readily available. So there's certain things that you can't get every place. So I just love it. And people look at me like, you are crazy. And I said, you know what? I decided that that's what really fills me up, is that part of the cooking process. So I think people need to find whatever that is for themselves and do it on a regular basis. And, let that inspire you in whatever way it's supposed to.
Absolutely. My toxic trait is I cannot arrive anywhere empty-handed. Like I cannot go to a parent-teacher conference and not have a present for the teacher. And my husband makes fun of me. He's like, can't we go anywhere and you're not bringing a gift? I'm like, it's my toxic trait. I cannot arrive anywhere, to a meeting, to a lunch, anything without something to give.
Right.
And that, I think that is, a base for this book too. It is cookies are
the perfect. They're so
giftable.
And people love them.
So people love them. They're easily
Has anyone ever
wrappable.
said, "Oh, Katie, that's okay. I really don't like chocolate chip cookies"?
No, never. I've never.
Right.
My cookies have never been rejected.
My Aunt Eileen lived on a farm in central Kentucky, and when we would go visit her, her toxic trait was you never left her house without her giving you something to take home. It could have been, who knows what it was. I mean, it could have been anything.
My grandmother did that. My grandmother would hand you the painting off the wall. You know,
Exactly.
she would just be like, go home
She's
with
like,
it.
oh
Yeah.
gosh, I got to give you something to take
I got to
with
give you
you.
something.
Exactly.
You can't leave without something. Yes,
Right.
that is so
Right.
funny. I think
So, yeah.
that's a Southern thing too.
I think it is too. And I think that, of course, baking cookies lends itself perfectly to that. And
Yes.
yeah. So one other thing I like to ask as we're wrapping up is we talk about cookbooks, obviously, on this podcast, what it's all about. But do you have a favorite cookbook that you have really learned a lot from, or you enjoy using, that you could share with everybody?
I love, my stepdad gave me years and years and years ago the Food Lab. And my stepdad is a more scientific cook. I mean, he makes his own yogurt and sourdough bread and all the things that seem difficult. His own bagels, seem like difficult and out of reach. Like, why would you make your own yogurt? I mean, so I think he's intrigued by the scientific background of cooking. And so he gifted me that book. And I just love that it kind of teaches you the basics of the science behind cooking. And once you kind of learn those basics, the options are endless. And so I think that the introduction to my book kind of celebrates that it kind of looks behind the science of chocolate chip cookies. And I was totally inspired by the Food Lab in that direction.
Yeah, it's a great book. If someone is looking for a book that's not just the recipes, but the whys behind it, and some really nice things that you can add to your repertoire and learn them, and you can just know how to do it. It's a terrific book. So I'll link to that in the show notes. It's
great. Or things that you knew but didn't know why.
Yeah.
Oh, there's really a science behind that. So it's totally interesting. Yes, a must read. Very good.
So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how they can connect with you online, and if you're doing any events in December or January that people can participate in, you're welcome to share that as well. Or if there's a place where they can find out where you're going to be, if they want to get a book. So tell everybody all about it.
Yes, my company and my website is stylingmyeveryday.com. You can also find me and the book at thechocolatechipcookiebook.com. You can find my daily adventures at Katie Jacobs Nashville on Instagram. Doing lots of fun things. My Instagram followers followed me those 2 years of creating all these recipes. And so it was so fun for them to finally get their hands on the books, because they have kind of lived with me through it for 2 years. So it was really exciting. But yeah, I've got book signings here in Nashville coming up into November and December. It would be really fun. It makes the perfect gift. Everybody is kind of wrapping it up with cookies that they bake, or with a cookie scoop or a cookie tray. Like, it just such a fun gift for a baker in your life. Or it's unbelievable that the brothers and dads have loved it so much, because they kind of dog ear all the things that they want you to cook or bake, or that they can bake too. So it makes a really great holiday gift leading into Christmas.
Yeah. It's a great size. It's I could see how it could pair very well with a batch of cookies. One recipe that stuck out to me is a vanilla ice cream cake with the chocolate chip cookies around the side. There is nothing better than chocolate chip cookies and ice cream. Vanilla ice cream.
I know. And I made a chocolate chip cookie ice cream sandwiches, and that was one of the most difficult recipes for me to finalize, because you don't want hard frozen chocolate chip cookies where you're trying to bite into ice cream and it's squishing out the sides. So I ended up making more like a sheet tray chocolate chip cookie, and then filling it with ice cream, and then cutting them into squares. And they're the most perfect square ice cream sandwiches that are incredibly soft. You underbake the cookie. And so it's things like that bothered me, that I was like, I can't just throw 2 cookies and ice cream together. So that's a really fun recipe. And yes, there's a lot of really fun make-ahead recipes, especially for the holiday, like that ice cream cake you're talking about.
It was great. Yeah.
Make this week, and then, throw it in the freezer and have it for Christmas.
And I ought to mention, there is a recipe too for a no-churn chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. But you talk about how to heat treat the flour so that it doesn't add a potential risk because there has been foodborne outbreaks connected to flour.
Which is, I mean, I didn't even know that. I don't think before I started testing.
Everybody always
book.
thought it was the eggs. Like, oh, don't eat that because
Right.
it's got raw eggs in it. Well, now they have connected it to flour. So I love that you have the edible cookie dough and you tell everybody how to heat treat the flour. And then you can make this lovely no-churn chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. And
Right.
And
there's several, there's a no-churn chocolate chip cookie dough recipe. And then there's also a salted caramel chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream in there. There's a vegan blizzard in there with edible chocolate chip cookie dough. So yeah, there's lots of ice cream options if that's your game.
And then the 30 recipes that didn't make it in the book, people can find at chocolate chip cookie Cookbook.
The chocolatechipcookiebook.com. Yep, they're all on the website.
Okay, so that's like bonus recipes if you all want more.
People are mad at me. Yeah, that some of those recipes are their favorite. There's like a Nutella chocolate chip cookie bar that didn't make the recipe book because we have several other Nutella recipes. And that's a lot of people's very favorite recipe. So there's some really fun additional content on the website.
Yeah, so I'll be sure to link to all that in the show notes. Well, Katie, it's been a lot of fun to talk to you today, talk to you all about chocolate chip cookies. I want to thank you for sharing your advice, your tips, your joy in this topic. It's been great to get to know you and share your book with everybody.
Maggie, you are a joy. Thank you so much. This was so fun.
It was fun. And I wish you all the best and have happy holidays.
Yes, ma'am. You too.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.